I'm Richard.
I'm Doug.
I'm Heidi.
And we're the Card Game Guys, the internet's premier source for DC deck building game content. We've got a bit of a treat for you today as it's the beginning of our Crisis game, which is our most requested video so far.
Yeah, Crisis is an interesting setup, and probably, for me anyway, the lowest success percentage, I think.
Yes, at the very least, when we started this game, we had never beaten a game of Crisis. Any version of it, 1, 2, or 3.
Well, I had a couple wins in Crisis, but with a different group than our core group that you typically see. But our deck sizes tend to be bigger with that group for the main deck, so it's a little bit easier. And so, a little bit different as far as that goes.
Yeah, and actually for this game, I made sure that the number of cards that we had was exactly what we'd have with one core set and one Crisis set.
Okay. Now, I've played it, but I'm not a fan of games where you lose to the game, so...
There has to be a winner.
So we didn't actually involve Heidi in this game, but she'll be beneficial to have here on the microphones. So one of the things that you need to know in terms of Crisis is that at the end of each turn, you add exactly one card to the lineup. You don't refill the lineup to 5 or anything like that. You always add exactly one card. So if nobody buys anything, you could end up with, a massive lineup consisting of the entire deck, which is a very good way to lose the game.
Right.
And the goal is just to beat all of the supervillains. But before you can beat any individual supervillain, you have to defeat a Crisis. Now you can see the Crisis box on the right of your screen telling you what our current Crisis is, which is Immortal Villain. So whenever an expensive non-villain card shows up, it goes away and gets replaced.
As you can see, it's happening right there because we had to get rid of Heat Vision.
Yes, which is too bad because all of the good non-villain cards are going away. But what's also a twist with Crisis is that before you can try to defeat the Crisis, you have to get all of the villains out of the lineup. But whenever you buy or gain a villain from the lineup, it doesn't go to your discard pile like it would normally do. It gets destroyed. So, for example, with Lobo out there, one of us is going to have to burn 7 power to beat Lobo, but then we get no benefit from it other than clearing a villain out of the lineup.
Right. They don't go to your hand and then do wonderful things.
Right.
Although there is a Black Lantern power ring sitting out there, so if one of us can pick that up, we can pick up those villains that are all getting destroyed.
Yes,
those are the destroyed pile.
You can gain villains from places other than the lineup.
Ooh, cheat card.
Say, what did I do to cheat there?
You treated Plastic Man as an equipment, which he is not. Yes, with the errated version that came out in Crisis 2, Plastic Man does not count as an equipment when you play him.
He copies an equipment, but he's not an equipment.
Right. He copies the game text, which does not include card type.
I suspect I do that a few times going forward, but I bet it's not too much of a problem because if I recall correctly, I get a pretty decent number of equipment going on as far as the deck goes.
And there we see me buying probably the most powerful card in Crisis, Magician's Corset.
Why do you think it's the most powerful?
Well, it's the way it's written, it's kind of a weak card normally, but it's really strong in Crisis because since you are playing cooperatively, which would be a good thing for us to mention now, you are all trying to win together. So with Magician's Corset, you pick a number of players, and each of those players draws a card, and then for each player who does, you gain 1 power. So ordinarily, you're going to be just picking yourself, and it's +1 power, draw a card, and it's kind of expensive for that. But in Crisis, you're getting something like all 4 of you draw a card, and +4 power.
But it's kind of necessary at a certain point just to be able to defeat things like the Crisis and then the villain.
There's a certain element of truth to that, yes. Now we see more Crisis shenanigans with magic. Now, one of the advantages with something like magic is that in Crisis, the victory points don't matter, so destroying cards isn't a huge problem. So you can, get the advantage of playing a card twice and then destroying it.
Yeah, the key thing is just trying to figure out when it's best to destroy it and when it's best to hang on to it.
Yeah, magic effectively just becomes Clayface, but
with a
thinning out
cost,
your deck
yes.
so you can get rid of the kicks you buy early on, or get rid of some of the other stuff that is just interesting for your deck and not vital.
And it actually works really well with like punches because you want to destroy it and it's an extra +1 power. So it's not terrible.
No, it's more like later on. You have to start making decisions that...
Sure. You can certainly get to the point where you decide, oh yes, I want to play Power Girl, for example, and play her twice, get 6 power. And I'm not going to mind destroying her because I don't need those 2 victory points at the end of the game. And beating this supervillain is way more important.
Well, and there are various crises that can do stuff to your superhero where it can cause you to lose it or switch it or things of that nature. So you might need to change your whole deck strategy up at some point. And if you need to go from buying equipment to buying superpowers, for example, you can thin out that equipment you've been buying with, say, magic, and up your percentage of superpowers in your personal deck.
So there we can see Magician's Corset really doing a solid job as I managed to get up to 10 power already and get rid of 2 of the villains out of the lineup, which is really nice.
Yeah, our lineup was getting pretty villain heavy there.
Well, it still is. There's still 2 there.
Okay, so you're getting rid of... Explain to people watching. So you're getting rid of the villains because...
You can't try to defeat the Crisis while there are villains in the lineup. Right. So you'll see the 2 beat line on the Crisis. And so you can attempt that at any point when there are no villains in the lineup. So some of them will involve random cards, but this one is just like we all have to have 5 power worth of cards in our hand, and there can't be a villain in the lineup in order for us to defeat the Crisis. And you can't try to beat the supervillain while the Crisis is still active. So we've got to get the Crisis out of the way.
Right, sorry, but I noticed on the screen it didn't explain about not having the villains in the lineup, so that's why. Otherwise, it would sound kind of nonsensical of, well, why do we want... What's wrong with the villains?
Yep.
Well, they're all fighting against you is what's wrong with the villains.
So another interesting thing is, unfortunately we lost it there due to the Crisis, but the cards that are specifically made for Crisis, like Mogo and the Hawkman's Mace, I forget the official title.
Nth Metal Mace, yeah.
Yes, that one. Where you get to choose the player for the effect, and it's not just, you helping yourself out. So, if it's, a player, you choose a player to draw a card, I might be choosing the Flash so that he can get that cards played count up for his ability to go off instead of just choosing me to improve my turn.
Now you see we just did go ahead and discard the 5 power each to go ahead and try to and take care of Immortal Villain. So now we can try to fight off Ra's al Ghul. It's worth noting we are playing with Impossible Mode villains, which is the default for Crisis. So you may have noticed on occasion we've been dealing with the stack ongoing that if you don't buy or gain a card from the lineup on your turn, you have to add an extra card of the main deck to the lineup. And that's how our lineup was getting so big at various points. But you'll see now, because you only add 1 by default, and we've been buying cards from the lineup, we're actually down to 4 cards from the lineup. Although that changed for the worse this time around.
Nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, that part of the reason that this game can start to feel so impossible, not so much with 1 or 2, is just that there is a large stack and they all have these different things. And you plan strategies for one and then it does you no good on the next one.
Yeah, a lot of the Crisis cards are nicely designed in that they can penalize you for being too successful at the game. And you will want to watch because there are some in the future that will actually have that impact on us for this time around. So be ready, folks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think another important thing to mention here is we are starting our new format with this video. So this game is going to be showcased weekly, and you'll get parts of the game as we go forward instead of having the longer videos. And so you'll see the first couple villains in this episode, and then next episode you'll see the next couple, and so on and so forth until we get the end. I believe we're doing 4 parts for this one.
Yes, it will be 4 parts. And to be honest, any of you who have played Crisis know that it goes really long. There's a lot more table talk. There's a lot of planning that goes into everything. And on top of that, it just is hard because there's a lot that you have to do. And this game was roughly 3 hours prior to editing.
Yeah, it was a long game.
And we managed to trim it down to 1 hour and 41 of video. But a lot of people don't really want to go sit down and watch a feature-length movie about the card game.
Sure.
So for your convenience, we've broken it up into television show-sized lengths.
There's a good card, Flash. Kid Flash.
I forgot to ask, too, how did you guys decide who was playing what for heroes?
We randomly dealt out 2 to everyone, and they picked whichever one they wanted.
Okay. 'Cause we haven't really talked about the heroes that people are playing either.
Yes. Well, it's because they haven't come into play a whole lot. You may have noticed once or twice we have triggered Crisis Shazam, which is who I was playing, which triggers on buying cards that cost 7 or more, or buying or gaining or defeating cards that cost 7
That's
or
a
more.
nice card, sorry.
Yeah, it lets you add a card from any player's discard pile to the bottom of the main deck to keep it from running out, so that you have time to defeat all of the supervillains. And that is a big advantage, to be able to add cards back to the main deck. Ooh, now we get to see our second supervillain and our second Crisis coming out. Now, this Crisis is certainly an interesting one because the next 10 cards we buy, we don't get right away. They're going to be going under the Collapsing Parallel Worlds Crisis, and then one of us has to destroy our deck and discard pile and gain those 10 cards as our deck.
Okay.
Now, I think we did something really intelligent here, because we looked at the lineup and we went, okay, so what's all out there right now? And if you look at the lineup, we can see that there are 4 equipment, and one of our heroes...
Actually, there are 5 equipment.
There are 5 equipment. Triggers off of equipment. And,
being Crisis Nightwing, played by Doug.
Yep. And so we decided the next 12 cards we're going to buy, or 10
yes,
are going to be equipment. And then we're just going to time it so that we beat the Crisis on my turn, and now I have a deck of 10 equipment. So that's one thing you can kind of do for these types of cards if you plot it out ahead of time and methodically do it. And hopefully we flip up equipment and we can keep doing it that way. But,
And you're actually all talking to each other, too, and attempting to form a coherent strategy.
yes, this is a very cooperative game, or a version of the game, versus the regular one where, everyone's just trying to win.
And one of I don't know if it's a rule per se, but a guideline that we use is we don't talk about the specific cards we have in our hand, because it's still, we still have our own hands that are concealed, but we can feel free to talk about whether we have what we need to beat the Crisis, or whether we have a certain card type or something that can interact with what other people have, but not playing essentially with our hands face up, like you would do in a lot of cooperative games.
No, or I mean, in a normal game, if you want something, you're going to buy it for yourself. In this game, you might very well decide that someone else would be better suited to buy it.
Right, and we did a lot of actually decision making with that, because there's a lot of games where you're just going to go crazy and be like, oh look, a power ring, I should buy that. But in this game, we specifically avoided doing that because David is playing as Crisis Batgirl, and she has an ability that you can discard a card from your hand to let a number of players equal to the victory point value of a card draw a card, which means that it turns every power ring or science cell or green arrow into discard this card, 3 players draw a card, which is really strong.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got to be getting pretty close here, I would think, for the crisis.
Yep.
Because I just bought 2, and we've been kind of going that route here.
So yeah, we talked about Nth Metal Mace. You can see that you can choose a player to reveal a top card of their deck. And in ordinary play, it's always going to be yourself. But in Crisis, it gives you a lot of flexibility to be like, okay, who's got a bunch of heroes in their deck? And so the guy who uses equipment can buy that even if he doesn't have a lot of heroes.
Right. Or if he has no heroes, in the case that's likely going to happen here.
Actually, you have a
Robin.
Hero of the Future and Robin already. So
right.
it's actually pretty good for you, too. I like how I'm saying that you have it, even though it's still under the crisis.
Right.
We know what the plan is.
Yep, we do know what the plan is. And we know the plan's successful, so.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that's interesting with the crisis character design for the superheroes is that, you know, there was an effort to distinguish them in the Crisis 1 set, but it really kind of came into its own in Crisis 2. Those superheroes are way more designed with playing Crisis mode in mind. So like we can see with the ones that we've got here is Crisis Nightwing lets everybody at the table look at the top card of their deck and choose whether they want to keep it or discard it. Crisis Batgirl can affect multiple players at the table to let them draw cards. Crisis Shazam, and he's not the only one, lets you actually add cards to the bottom of the main deck, which is a huge thing.
Because once that main deck runs out, and if the villains are still there, you've lost.
Right, you're buying yourself turns with Shazam.
Right, because you are on a clock when you've got every turn one card gets flipped up. Every card you can put back on there gets you one more turn to try to get through the supervillains and the crises.
Although you're on a clock and it's 3 hours of playtime, huh?
Right. A metaphorical clock.
Okay, so the crisis just got defeated now.
Yes, and Doug has his new deck full of super equipment.
La la la, say the right thing.
Yes.
Super customized cards. That's
so now we see the first use of the Black Lantern ring to start, buying the better villains out of the destroyed pile, and Lobo's already there, which is, I'm sure, going to help.
Yeah, there's quite the stack over there of destroyed cards.
Well, you have to remember our first crisis was if there's a non-villain 6 or higher popping up,
no, I knew that. It's just more that.
Yep.
And for, again, the crisis and the order they come up is completely random, so. Yeah,
you never know quite what you're about to be hit with, which is a little unfortunate because there are occasions where a crisis can pop up and there's just no way for you to win the game because of the particular text of that crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Because it might be, You
need low power cards to defeat the villain, and then all of a sudden, and that's way far into the game, and.
Yeah, everyone has an unlock. Low-cost cards or something like that.
Or something like that, yep.
Sorry, I played a game like that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a variety of ways where you just lose, and that's what happens.
Yeah, it really requires a lot of tight tactical play, and making good decisions is very important.
There's the corset again.
And yeah, sometimes you just get, oh look, I got to draw a card and it was the Magician's Corset or something like that. And you get a huge swing where you get to take out Hector Hammond.
Hammond, yeah.
And you'll get to see next time who we get to face next. So, tune in next week and you'll be able to see us continue with this Crisis game, the card game, guys. Come play with us.